The late Fred Craddock, who was the longtime preaching professor at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University, tells this story about when he was a seminary professor in Oklahoma. The call came at 9:15 in the morning. It was a frantic woman's voice from the local United Evangelical Brethren Church. "Can you come teach our Sunday school class?" she asked. "Well, it's already Sunday. What Sunday did you have in mind?" Craddock responded. Today. It's almost time for the lesson, and we don't have anybody to teach our class." And he said, "Well, I have to prepare a lesson." And she goes, "No, we're doing this series on the parables of Jesus. Today's the prodigal son. You can do it blindfolded. Come on down." And she hung up the phone. Craddock admits that he was a little annoyed, a little peeved that this woman would be so audacious, but he got up, he got dressed, he got in the car, but he decided on his way down to the church to play a little trick on the Sunday school class. So he got into the room and he said, today our Sunday school lesson is on the story of the prodigal son. It's in Luke 15. It's so familiar, I'm not even going to read it, but just as a refresher, this is how it goes. A man gave his substance to his two sons. His younger son went off to the far country and wasted his substance on unrighteous living. He finally came to his senses and came home to confess, "I've sinned against heaven and in your sight." When he gets home, he hears music and dancing. And he pulls one of the servants aside and he says, "What's going on here?" And the servant said, "Your brother stayed home and worked while you were gone and were out partying. Your father appreciates him and has given him a party." And from the back of the room of the Sunday school class, a woman's voice shouted out, "That's the way it should have been." And that's it. That's the rub for this story Jesus tells, which I think is the most illustrative story of the entire Gospel of Luke. In my estimation, it may be the greatest example of the gospel that we are called to, because this story offends everything else we know about justice and fairness and decency that's buried deep in our bones, that flows through the blood in our veins, that is wrapped around the double helix of our DNA. A man has two sons. We call this the story of the prodigal son. Jesus didn't label it that way. Jesus starts the story by saying a man has two sons. I want to challenge us today then to think about this man actually having two prodigal sons. Two sons who wander far from home. In that case, it may not offend our sense of justice quite as much. Both sons suffer from the same sinfulness. It's just that one of the two sons exhibits it in a less socially acceptable way, whereas the other one shows that sinfulness in a way that we tolerate and sometimes we even celebrate. The younger son asks his father for the inheritance that is his. That is unheard of in ancient Palestine. He's essentially saying to his dad, "Dad, you're worth more to me dead than alive. The only reason I care about you is because of the stuff you're going to leave me." Strangely, the father grants the request. Now, an inheritance in ancient Israel was not a stock portfolio and a life insurance policy and some money in a checking account. What would a person have left their children as an inheritance? Land, yeah. So we've been in this year of the Bible. We've been in the Old Testament for 9 months. I hope you realize by now how important the land is to the Israelites, all the way back to that promise to Abraham. This son then is not only rejecting his father, he's rejecting his community, he's rejecting his national story, he's rejecting his religion. He sells the land. And he takes the money and he goes across the border to the far country. And so what's at the heart of this young man's sin? This son wants what he did not earn, and he cries out in entitlement for it. But he wants to be able to do with that inheritance whatever he wants for himself. He believes that joy and contentment come when we are freed from all constraints and requirements on ourselves. He's entirely self-consumed. Liberation from all commitments is his God. Now jump ahead to the end of the story. Elder son has worked past sundown yet again. He comes to the house. He hears the music and the dancing. This industrious son grabs a nearby slave. He asks what's happening. When he discovers the party's for his brother, he refuses to go in. When the father comes and pleads with him, the elder son says, "For all these years, I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might have a party with my friends." What does that sentence reveal about the character of the elder brother? I've worked hard, I've followed the rules. Where's my party? When do I get a party with the earnings with my friends? When does all this hard work and obedience pay off in the inheritance I've been working so hard to attain? You hear it? The elder son does not work obediently because he wants to honor his father, because he cherishes the land, because he appreciates the story of his people. He's just looking out for himself like the younger brother is. He just chose the tactic of obedience to get the inheritance his younger brother took by demand. But what both brothers want is their inheritance from their father to do with whatever they want for themselves. The elder brother just uses his younger brother as a foil to puff himself up and to make himself look better. But both brothers sin against their father, reject him, and see him only as a means to an end. The younger one wants the inheritance for himself so he can live free of all obligation. The older brother wants the inheritance to show how powerful and important he is. To put it even more simply, the younger son wants to hide in sensual pleasures. The older son wants to hide in selfish pride. Neither son cares one bit about the father. The miracle of the story before us is that the father, rejected by both sons, refuses to give up on either one of them. The younger son decides to try and come home. This is a ridiculous idea. Every Palestinian in society would know that once you say that to your father, "Give me the inheritance, you're worth more to me dead than alive," you can't go home. The father would write you out of his heart and his life. He would never even speak of you that he ever had you as a son in the past anymore. You do not disobey parents that way. But the boy's at his end. So he comes home prepared with a speech to ask merely for a place on the work crew. He's ready now to confess his sin and acknowledge his wrong. He no longer wishes to be unattached to the land, from his family to his faith. He now knows that freedom really comes through our commitments. But he also knows that coming home is a long shot. It's a shot he does not deserve. But while he was still far off, Jesus says, that's a hint. The father sees his son while he is still far off. That tells us that the father has been looking to the horizon every day since that son left home. The father cannot give up. Even with all the shame his son has caused him, the father's love cannot be broken. It cannot be broken even despite the child's sin. Then the shamed father does something that no Palestinian man would do. He barges out of the house and runs to the son, bringing even more shame on himself. He wraps his arms around the boy and kisses him. The son can't even get through his speech of repentance before the father starts party planning. The father does not care how far the boy has gone or how poorly he treated him. All the father wants is his son to be home. And just as the father will not abandon the son who runs away physically, he also will not turn away from the son who refuses to come into the party. Again, he leaves the home seeking this son just as he ran down the driveway after the younger son. When the elder son grows angry and indignant, the father does not raise his voice or puff up his chest to meet the son's aggression. He does not condemn the loveless elder brother. Instead, he says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." Here's your key line. All that is mine. Neither son has a right to the inheritance, but the gracious father plans to leave it to the elder brother. He leaves it to the elder brother even when the elder brother will not respond to the father's pleading. The love of the father for his son surpasses the treatment he receives from his son. The father just wants both children home. Now, home, you already know this. Home is not a geographic location. 20th century preacher George Buttrick describes it this way. Home is the place where we lay aside the mask which the hard world compels us to wear. Home is the abode of mutual confidence, the free outpouring of the inmost mind, where joys are doubled by companionship and pains are halved by sympathy. Home is where you are vulnerable and honest about your brokenness. Home is where you confess and receive forgiveness. Home is where you come to find there is a God who knows you through and loves you still and all. That is home. Now, I don't know about everybody who's here today, but I imagine there's someone here who feels as though you are in the far country, far from home. You've wandered from who you know you are in your inmost heart, tried to create a life of momentary enjoyments and adventure free of responsibility. Perhaps you find yourself in the pigsty, realizing that in the light of eternity, that a life free of bonded commitment is really no life at all. There's a father who's watching from the window. He's been watching every day of your wandering. Come home. I know there are folks here today too, responsible, committed, working daily to prove our worth to God and to our coworkers and boss and neighbors and family and friends. People who keep their eye on the prize, win the awards and the trophies, get the promotion, build a successful career and an impressive resume. But all that facade of accomplishment barricades you from deep joy. We cannot bury our deficiencies under a pile of awards. We cannot hide our insecurities among the accolades we receive. Lay it down. Open up and come home. The love of our God will always keep holding vigil. The love of our God will keep seeking us, going out to meet us. The love of God is here for you today. May we confess our need for it, our emptiness without it, and our wholeness within it. O ye who are weary, come home.